so much for attending this session and for attending LCLC this year. Thank you to Emerson for running the technical aspects of this. My name is Christina Davidson. I'm a PhD candidate here in the Department of English. I currently work in the College of Business as a business communication instructor, but I completed one of my exams with Dr. Beberman, and so I was really excited to work with him and to chair this panel, and I'm very happy to hear the presentations today. So the first one on our list for today, although we have some folks who are not going to be with us today, would be Lesley Higgins from York University, and you are welcome to go ahead and begin. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Hang on. I will. There we go. Can everyone see my PowerPoint? Excellent. Thank you. I know Louisville's having awful weather, and we've had more than 2 feet of snow here in Toronto in the last 5 days, so everything seems difficult. I will start. Of course, there are poems and fiction about jazz, from Fitzgerald's Tales of the Jazz Age to Baldwin's Sonny's Blues. But this presentation this morning considers intermedial works that are, first and foremost, jazz books. Virginia Woolf's Three Guineas, Henri Matisse's Jazz, and Langston Hughes's Ask Your Mama demonstrate that the polyphonic genre is capacious and diverse. Each volume challenges the conventions of the codex, from typography and mise-en-page to basic paratextual elements, and the standard reading practices they presume. Three Guineas, Jazz, and Ask Your Mama are aesthetically innovative and politically transgressive. They remind us that modernism can be closely related to new forms of social and cultural diversity. Three Guineas is a book as camouflage, Jazz as exhibition, Ask Your Mama an extended lesson in activism. They are avant-garde in their methods, but designed to be revisionist histories. Specifically, they demand fresh responses to complex political crises. For Woolf, the Spanish Civil War and incursions of European fascism. For Matisse, the possibilities of response in Nazi-occupied France. And for Hughes, anti-Black racism in the context of the 1960 Newport Jazz Festival riot. Dissonance is both theme and method. These disparate jazz books foreground strategies of resistance. Yet, the subversiveness of Woolf's Three Guineas is not immediately apparent. From the outside, it looks like most books, taller than it is wide, unassuming dust jacket in muted colors, commercial printing and binding. The author is a well-known writer of fiction, but there's nothing, not even a subtitle, to indicate the generic nature of the contents. The text begins almost apologetically, the reader immediately off kilter. Quote, 3 years is a long time to leave a letter unanswered, and your letter has been lying without an answer even longer than that. I had hoped that it would answer itself, or that other people would answer it for me. But there it is with its question. How, in your opinion, are we to prevent war? Still unanswered. What transpires is a vehement, often satirical polemic that exposes the tyrannical underpinnings of patriarchy. Moreover, Three Guineas, ironically named for the coin most intimately connected to the slave trade, insists that tyranny at home is inextricably connected to tyranny abroad, the actions of English imperialists, Franco, Mussolini, and Hitler. Matisse's jazz is more familiar to art lovers in this eviscerated state. 20 prints demonstrating that drawing with scissors, his definition of the cutouts, really was the culmination of a lifetime devoted to the study of color. But the book, an exceptional 16.5 inches wide and 12 3/4 inches tall, is aesthetically and politically challenging. Aesthetically, the juxtaposition of plates in Matisse's cursive text demonstrate how one can exploit space as a shaping element in the experience of reading. Many of the plates, 8 of which have circus themes, invite allegorical interpretations. The similarities between Monsieur Loyal, the fictional Parisian ringmaster shown in profile, and the actual Charles de Gaulle, who directed the Free French forces against the Nazis. The wolf, with its blood-red tear-shaped eye, has always been associated with Hitler and the Gestapo. The fall of Icarus is foreboding, even tragic. Rather than conclude with one of the three vibrant lagoon prints, jazz ends with toboggan, how apt right now, which features another falling figure. The word circus suggests delight and amazement, but the clown's funeral cortege is depicted, and this dehumanized sword swallower. Like jazz, Hughes's Ask Your Mama was designed to be physically arresting. If ask were a voice, it would be a shout. Everything about it is brash. Dust jacketed cover, salmon-colored paper, pages printed in brown ink or dark blue. The poetry in each of the 12 sections is harshly worded, allusively dense. Like Three Guineas, Ask is invested in economic critique, but Hughes's American speaker, assuming a very different racialized and class position, thematizes the quarter, or 25 cents, the cost of putting money in the meter for electricity or heating or feeding, quote, fat jukeboxes. Each quarter clinks into a million pools of quarters to be carted off by Brinks. Throughout the text, one hears an insistent child asking for a quarter from their grandmother, the fare needed to see a movie. But just as persistently, the speaker takes the reader to, quote, the quarter of the Negroes in the American South and North, where lives are not only precarious but at risk, where the doors are doors of paper. It is a world of welfare checks in which, quote, 20-story housing projects have replaced once thriving supportive neighborhoods. Hard times endure, we are told, and children, quote, must live in a hurry in order to live at all. The jazz book, I'm arguing, is an expressive form in which textual, graphic, and spatial elements interact. It is also what Michel Foucault would call an experience book. Quote, to make for myself and to invite others to make with me, through a determined historical content, an experience of what we are, of what is not only our past, but also our present, an experience of our modernity such that we would be transformed. Experience books transform the subjects and objects of knowledge, reveal unseen, unthought, unsaid potentialities. The reader becomes an active participant in a text designed to be as immersive as possible. As Woolf insists, quote, to read a book well, one should read it as if one were writing it. Begin not by sitting on the bench among the judges, but by standing in the dock with the criminal. Be his fellow worker, become his accomplice. Jed Rasselin notes that jazz unquestionably informed modernism as intellectual challenge, sensory provocation, and social texture. He further suggests that the basic reciprocity between jazz and modernism includes, quote, the allure of the renegade, the dissident, the upstart. In Three Guineas, Woolf praises the dissentients, those who have the intelligence and the nerve to think and act differently. I'm presenting Woolf, Matisse, and Hughes as dissentients and controversialists. All three were intimately involved in their jazz books at every transformative stage. Woolf as author and publisher of Hogarth Press, Matisse as visual artist, author, and book designer, and Hughes as poet and collaborator with Knopf editor Judith Jones. Each text is not only polyphonic in terms of the voices or perspectives represented, but specifically dialogic. For Woolf, Three Guineas emerged from an unsuccessful attempt to produce a hybrid essay novel. The novel was published separately as The Years. For Matisse, jazz should be read in concert with his essay, How I Made My Books. For Hughes, Ask Your Mama is an angry poetic reimagining of his 1955 project, The Glory of Negro History, a spoken word album in which his uplifting narrative is punctuated by songs. With Three Guineas, reading happens just as you would expect, left to right, top to bottom, nothing unusual. Yet the book complicates the process in two ways. Firstly, with the endnotes, additional material that thickens the reader's experience, potentially alters the linearity and go-aheadness of traditional readerly engagement. Secondly, with the photographs that interrupt the text. Photos play a double role. Images of atrocities from Spain are mentioned repeatedly, but not shown. The narrator will not exploit them, as Franco's government has done. Instead, the text is punctuated by 5 photos featuring Englishmen elaborately dressed for some of the ceremonies that sustain patriarchy. We find a general, heralds at work, and one horse's ass, enrobed academics, a bewigged judge, and an archbishop followed by acolytes. Status and power are on parade, yet risibly transposed and vehemently censured. The hygienic splendor of professional costumes masks brutal exercises of power. Walter Benjamin, Woolf's exact contemporary, observes that, quote, "It is the task of the photographer to uncover guilt and name the guilty. In Three Guineas, the narrator does both vehemently, and in the process, the critical affordances of the jazz book are brilliantly displayed." Matisse's jazz compels through the delight of his orchestration of words, pictures, and decorations, page by page, even line by line. No two-page spreads are entirely the same. The cursive text flows into columns. White space is deployed generously. Hughes's book is even more demanding. Each page has 2 columns of generously leaded text. The poetry, all caps, Roman type, flush left, and running down the right-hand side of the page, columns of various lengths, at most 1 inch wide, all italics. They consist of musical prompts, suggestions for accompaniment. This one example will have to suffice. Makes no difference to me, but I'm asking anyhow. What time is it, Mama? What time now? Down the long, hard row that I have been hoeing, I thought I heard the horn of plenty blowing, but I got to get a new antenna, Lord. My TV keeps on snowing. Sorry. One reads each block separately to grasp its basic meaning, but comprehending the page only begins when its 2 textual elements or zones become a multi-directional flow of reading. For a more vivid metaphor for the reading process, consider Matisse describing his 1932 Mallarmé book. Quote, "I compare my 2 pages to 2 objects taken out by a juggler. Suppose that his white ball and black ball are like my 2 pages, the light one and the dark one, so different, yet face to face. In spite of the differences between the 2 objects, the art of the juggler makes a harmonious whole in the eyes of the spectator." Woolf's awareness of text and page was honed by years of typesetting for Hogarth. The story of how the firm was launched usually focuses on the hand press Virginia and Leonard installed on their dining room table. I'm more interested in the type that they bought, Caslon Old Face. Designed in the 1720s by William Caslon, the font now belongs in the pantheon of classic typefaces, praised for its crispness of execution, solidity, and lack of pretension. Caslon was much in demand for 50 years, then out of fashion, but then revived from the 1890s to the 1930s. It was the font of choice for Vogue magazine, founded 1892, and the New Yorker, established in 1925. In other words, the typeface's cachet helped to develop the Woolf's visual brand, and for 3 guineas, provides a kind of visual quiet for the storm of polemical words. Matisse liked to have a choice of types for his book projects, but his personal favorites were Caslon and Garamond. For jazz, however, he made a very different, even startling choice. The notes were written in his own cursive script and photo engraved. As Matisse explains, quote, "The exceptional size of the writing seems necessary to me in order to be in a decorative relationship with the character of the color prints. As a result, the commentary seems spontaneous, another jazz hallmark, and the effect is both decorative and intimate." The typography of Ask Your Mama is assertive. The distinctive Egyptian font is the face of telegrams, concert posters, and advertisements of newspaper headlines. The predominantly all-cap text might be a nod to Stephen Crane's The Black Riders and other lines, but Hughes had been experimenting with expressive typography for jazz-related texts since the 1920s. More importantly, Hughes's typescripts in the Beinecke Library reveal that one draft of each poem would be prepared in all caps. Why? Perhaps to distance himself from the text and better assess lineation and strophic design. Perhaps because presented thus, the text resembled a radio script or, in the 1950s, cue cards for a television performance, and thus encouraged a fresh, dramatic textual encounter that enabled him to revise decisively. Like most French books, the table of contents for jazz appears last. Matisse, however, chose hieroglyphs, as you see, instead of words for his table des images. Pen-drawn vignettes designate the image's salient features. These thumbnail sketches take us back over the cutout pictures and reveal their titles for the first time. Some might think that withholding the titles disadvantages the reader, but another possibility, the reader reacts more imaginatively to works that are not pre-labeled and summarized. Hughes also has a final surprise for his reader, a very different kind of coda in the form of prose liner notes for the poetically unhep, synopses of each of the 12 poetic sections. Undoubtedly, the notes in upper and lower case are concessionary, a source of clarification. They are also a reward for the reader's perseverance. But what about the jazz? In one of the most intriguing moments of cultural coincidence, both Hughes and Matisse could have been listening to jazz in the same Paris joints. Hughes worked as a dishwasher at Le Grand Duc, a Paris nightclub, in spring 1924. In the post-World War I era and thereafter, Parisians, devotees of ragtime since 1911, captivated by Josephine Baker and Necrophilie, and attuned to the performances of the Harlem Hellfighters, they welcomed jazz in ways that white and black Americans were slow to emulate. There are wonderful things in real jazz, Matisse told a friend in late 1947, quote, the talent for improvisation, the liveliness, the being at one with the audience. The penultimate paragraph of Matisse's note states, quote, jazz. These images, with their lively and violent tones, derive from crystallizations of memories. The pages form a kind of sonorous ground that supports them and folds them and protects them in their particularities. And what of Woolf's sonorous ground? Well, the original Dixieland Jazz Band toured throughout England in 1919, generating avid public attention. Woolf's diary for May 1919 mentions that Bella Locke, her sister-in-law, is, quote, learning to jazz. Well, so is Woolf. She knew something about jazz from the gramophone records that her friend, Tom Elliott, would bring to her home, so they could dance. Her brother-in-law, Clive Bell, denounced jazz in a 1921 essay for the New Republic, an essay that barely disguised its racist undertones. But one of the best mass-market venues for reading jazz-positive pieces in the 1920s was British Vogue magazine, which cultivated the language of avant-garde taste mixed with popular appeal. Woolf herself published 5 articles in Vogue between 1923 and 1926. It wasn't until the late 1930s that Woolf had the perfect opportunity to craft jazzy prose. In between the acts, the penultimate scene in the pageant is set in present times. The narrative sizzles with different points of view. The tune changed, snapped, broke, jagged. Foxtrot, was it? Jazz? Anyhow, the rhythm kicked, reared, snapped short. What a cackle, a cacophony. Nothing ended, very up to date all the same. What is her game? To disrupt? Jog and trot? Oh, the irreverence of the generation, which is only momentarily, thanks be, the young. The young who can't make but only break, shiver into splinters the old vision, smash to atoms what was whole. For jazz books, disrupting the reader is both mandate and method. According to Hughes's first book of jazz, which is wonderful, written for children, jazz has 10 basic elements: syncopation, improvisation, percussion, rhythm, blue notes, tone color, harmony, break, riff, and the joy of playing. The riff, a single rhythmic phrase repeated over and over, is a vital and energizing technique for all 3 jazz books. The 2 riffs or motifs that punctuate Hughes's task are Ask Your Mama and In the Quarter. The former phrase signals the poem's emotional register, the latter its historical and cultural vectors. Used colloquially, Ask Your Mama is a device for being disrespectful. But in Ask, it is that and a provocation. The quarters of blacks extend from the South to Cincinnati, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Kingston, Jamaica, Paris, and, quote, the farthest corners of the now known world, to insist that deprivations register locally, nationally, and internationally. Matisse's jazz features 3 major motifs, all nonverbal: the color motifs, the fronds, which punctuate the book beautifully, and these hand-drawn arabesques. 3 Guineas is a jazz book par excellence because of its strategic verbal riffs. The 5 minor riffs are the alleged facts promoted by patriarchy, the annual amount of military spending, the processions of the patriarchs, the voracious receptacle that is Arthur's education fund, and what the real nature of our influence as outsiders could be. The 5 major riffs are the question, how can anyone prevent war? The photographs of ruined houses and dead bodies, the promise of outsidership to offset the blare of patriotism and nationalism, the example of Wilfred Owen's anti-war poetry, and Sophocles' Antigone, in which a woman stands up to a tyrant despite certain death. And Creon, the narrator, intones, scattered the land with the bodies of the dead. Things repeat themselves, it seems. Pictures and voices are the same today as they were 2,000 years ago. To conclude, Reva Castleman suggests that Matisse, quote, has taught the eye to hear. All 3 jazz books do just that, provide an experience in which form, content, and meaning intricately combine and recombined like features in a Calder mobile. Jazz books provoke cultural exchanges that continue to consort and reverberate. Thank you.
Thank you for such a wonderful and engaging presentation. That was fantastic. We're going to move on to our next presenter, and then we'll have time at the very close of this session for questions for both presenters. I believe there's only 2 in here now. So coming up next is going to be Marjan, and coming to us from UT Dallas. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. Just let me share. I think someone is okay. So I think we need to close it first. Yes, now I can share it. Okay. Is it clear?
Yes, we can see it. You'll just have
Thank
to put it
you.
in mode to make it
Okay.
larger. Yes, but perfect.
Thank you very much. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm now in Dallas, and time is 10. My name is Marjan, and I'm a PhD candidate. Hopefully, last semester I passed my field exam, and I'm originally from Iran. I was born in beautiful Tehran. My language is Farsi, Persian. Thank you very much for attending this session. My paper is Dancing Around the Truth, Failing Sublimation in Zadie Smith's Swing Time. Okay, just let me see. Okay, now it's better. Yes. Acclaimed novelist Zadie Smith's 5th novel and her first to be written in the first-person voice tells of the friendship of 2 young women from childhood to adulthood. But both the unnamed narrator and her childhood best friend Tracy have one white parent and one black one. Both grew up in London's housing projects. Both are absorbed in the world of dance and dancers. However, Tracy has the talent to pursue dance as a career, while the narrator, means N in the novel, allows herself to be swept up in the world of a narcissistic singer, Amy. The novel's title, Swing Time, is both the name of one of the old black and white movie musicals beloved by the narrator and a play on the words swing and time. The novel swings time itself as each part shifts back and forth between the narrator's past and present, unveiling mysteries that are revealed over time. Zadie Smith's Swing Time, which was written in 2016, ends where it begins. The unnamed protagonist is a 30-something woman recently fired from her job, returning to London after 10 years spent traveling as a personal assistant of a Madonna-like pop star. The quote from the heading, "Now everyone knows who you really are," sets the tone and the theme of the entire novel. The reader follows the narrator from childhood into her 30s, and then they together try to figure out who this person actually is. The quote promises an answer to this search for identity. However, the issue proves to be quite to be quite complicated. Anne is the child of an English father and a Jamaican mother, situated between two races, trying to find her own tribe. Her research for identity is always related to various role models she chooses for herself, women who are supposed to help her define who she is. This goal is never attained, however, as the narrator proves to be a person living in the shadow of others, mainly defined by what and who she is not. As we can see, Zadie Smith complicates the life of her protagonist by giving her a biracial background and a post-diasporic existence. For a further analysis of this breathing symbol of for a further analysis of this identity, it's useful to take a closer look at dance and how it means shifts and changes for Anne in the novel. When she first attends dance classes, the racial and classes differences are palpable. She's the only one whose ballet shoes do not have the characteristic pink color, and she's lacking in equipment. And she's trying to learn the dance of the white people, often feeling out of place. Starting from the novel's title, which invokes the 1938 American musical featuring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, Smith's novel is not only infused with dance, but it enters on dance as the key to approach to identity. Dance defines the lives of Anne and her friend Tracy, the two working class biracial girls, and the greatest questions referring to their identity are also rooted in dance. For these girls, one particular dancer from these musicals by the name of Jenny Legon becomes the symbol of their own lives. Legon, in Anne's word, is more than a dancer. She is a person, actress, symbol, an elusive dancer, talented, a living and breathing symbol of identity, race, and invisibility, but also the possibility of freedom proved by this very invisibility. Is this what Anne aspires for? The word of Anne's mother, "You will end up a shade of yourself," echo throughout the novel. However, despite the negative charge of her mother's words, it seems for a long time that Anne dreams of being as invisible, as elusive, as free as a shadow. This dream of hers materializes through her wish to become a dancer, who in her understanding embodies the rootlessness as she craves. So she's craving for rootlessness. To her, dancing gives the opportunity to become unattached, autonomous, a free-floating individual who enjoys this freedom. This may be the reason why, despite her lack of real talent for dancing, she's still obsessed with dancing and movement. She dreams of becoming a dancer whom she defines as a man from nowhere, without parents or siblings, without a nation or people, without obligations of any kind. To her, the dancer embodies something which is beyond the reality and mobility she desperately craves. A great dancer has no time, no generation. He moves eternally through the world. This would be the opportunity for her to call all ties with her past, with her fate she was predestined to have. Her epiphany comes with the musicals she becomes infatuated with, and one in particular, Ali Baba Goes to Town, in which she notices Jenny Legon. Jenny Legon's fate, despite the girl's impression of her success, represents the shattering of illusion and a realization of the racial discrepancy and power dynamic in show business. Although the two girls see her in the successful artist in the limelight, Anne's later realization will confirm Legon's incapacity to get out of the shadow. Legon, the image of this mesmerizing dancer, proves to be fiction. When older Anne has the opportunity to research her own childhood idol, the girl who looks like them, who is a talented and accomplished dancer, a star, and the mirage suddenly disperses. As N confesses, I'd imagine, for example, a whole narrative of friendship and respect between Legon and the people who worked with, the dancers and the directions. Or I'd wanted to believe that friendship and respect could have existed in the same spirit of childish optimism that makes a little girl want to believe her parents are deeply in love. But she realizes as an adult that Legon was only hired for maid parts. And after a while, not even those. This meant that the person Tracy had imitated so perfectly all those years ago, that was not really a person at all. That was only a shadow. Even her lovely name, which we both so envied, even that was unreal in reality. She was the daughter of Hector and Harriet Ligon, migrated from Georgia, descendants of sharecroppers. While the other Ligon, the only we thought we knew, that happy-go-lucky Hoofer, she was a fictional being, born of typo, whom Luella Parsoness dreamed of one day when she missed Ligon in her syndicated gossip column in the LA Examiner. This is how the fancy of this successful dancer suddenly evaporates. And with it, the failure of the girls' search for their identity is even more pronounced. They both work for the attainment of success and by implication for an identity, but they also actively sabotage it again and again. According to Floor van der Laan, swing time dislodges what identity is or should be. It presents something plural, the I as a range of possibilities, albeit a limited range. One's race, class, gender, and location in place and time determine the limits of this dance of multiple identities. Musicals are central symbols in Smith's 2016 novel. Swing Time, Ali Baba Goes to Town, and other iconic shows become the artistic representation of the two girls' formation and the various changes they undergo as they mature. The girls' interpretation of these musicals proves rather problematic and even shifting. For example, Ali Baba Goes to Town is a musical through which the novel captures a shift in perspectives. Anne first wants to see it in possibility of equality of blacks and whites happily dancing together, finding common ground in a language that is represented by the famous song of Hidi, 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 Hi, the call of Cab Calloway, which the Africans recognize and cry out the response, Hodi, 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 Ho. While Anne recognizes a beauty in this scene and the origins of tap dancing her date, a conscious young man called Rakim provides a sobering parody of the actual situation. Oh, Massa, I so happy on this here slave ship. I be dancing for joy. At the time, however, not even this wake up can shake Anne out of her illusion of dance having this freeing and equalizing power. Several years need to pass, and another experience, that of working for Emmy, will prompt her to recognize Fred Astaire in the 1938 musical Swing Time is wearing blackface and is undoubtedly an instance of the stereotypical racist portrayal of people of color by white colors with their faces painted black. The politicizers races and asserts white dominance over the discourse about race. Actors in the blackface play black as a spectacle and keep black actors off a stage and screen. Screen paradigmatic scene in the movie is largely based on a game of shadow and light, a multiplication of the dancer's body, and a dance competition acted out among these bodies. Whereas it first seems like Bill Robinson is the center and winner of the scene. Anne's late realization reveals the blackface-wearing Austery to be the actual center and protagonist. As reflected in these musicals, Anne is struggling to see a possibility of her biracial self to be autonomous, to prove history wrong, or at least create a world out of time, out of space, when she can be equal, strong herself. Dance is supposed to be a universal language, one that can transcend race, sex, class, and even time. But history shatters this vision and instead proves how even dance fails when it comes to social and racial barriers. As Susanna Scoff remarks, dance in the novel represents a diasporic resource used to map the complex and uneven histories of American Hollywood musicals of the swing era on the lives of its protagonists in contemporary Northwest London, and wants to believe in the dance promises world, in the freedom also wishes to attain, but whatever she turns, it proves to further confuse her instead of bringing clarity and the free and complete freedom. Dance fails. It is incapable of suppressing racial inequalities. So the cosmopolitan life is the other means by which Anne tries to find her autonomy, herself. But her visits to Africa reveal the constructed and commodified nature of Black identity, and is considered the wealthy, white, privileged savior. All authentic experiences are tainted, and the true extent of her ruthlessness comes to the surface. So dancing is, sorry, just give me a second. So dancing in swing time fails as a form of sublimation because it does not successfully redirect the protagonist's suppressed emotions and desires into a transformative or fulfilling outlet. So Sigmund Freud's sublimation didn't work. Instead, dancing becomes a mechanism of avoidance, reinforcing their struggles rather than providing liberation. And these are the reasons. One, dance as an imperfect escape. From childhood, both the unnamed protagonist and Tracy view dance as a means of self-expression and upward mobility. However, instead of leading to genuine transformation, dance becomes a fleeting distraction from their socioeconomic struggles and fractured identities. What is the second reason? Lack of personal growth through dance. Freud's theory of sublimation suggests that repressed desires can be redirected into socially acceptable or productive outlets such as dancing. For sublimation to be successful, it must allow for the individual's emotional resolution and personal development. Instead of resolving their issue, both women remain trapped in the cycles of repression and avoidance. The protagonist ultimately steps away from dance, not because she has moved beyond it, but because she remains emotionally disconnected from her passions and history. The next reason, dance as a symbol of stagnation, not growth. Dance is supposed to be a signal of growth, development, but throughout the novel, dance is supposed to be a creative outlet, yet it serves more as a metaphor for evasion. The protagonist never takes center stage, literally or figuratively, mirroring her broader passivity in life. Tracy, who initially had the most potential, finds herself stuck in her childhood environment, her body aging, and her talent fading without achieving the success she once dreamed of. The next reason is performative as genuine expression. The protagonist's work with Amy further highlights the failure of sublimation through performance. Amy's philanthropy, much like the protagonist's approach to dance, is performative rather than transformative. Just as the protagonist stands on the periphery of Amy's global ventures, she also stands on the periphery of her own life. never truly engaging in meaningful self-discovery. So these are the reasons that dance considered as a failed form of sublimation. It fails to serve as a productive outlet for the protagonist's repressed desires. So finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marjan.
Thank you. Thank you for listening patiently. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So now we have time for questions for each of our presenters, unless there's another presenter in here, although I checked and I don't think so. Okay, so time for questions. Oh, I have a couple of questions. I have one for each of you. Lesley, I loved this metaphor that you brought in to explain these texts. It was a Matisse metaphor. It's a juggler. And you did such a wonderful job explaining how the textual parts emphasize this whole. I wonder if you would speak for just a second about how other factors are a portion of that metaphor, like maybe like historical context. Like I feel like there's other things that are being like juggled. You know, they're different objects that are making that whole in each of those texts. I thought that was brilliant, and I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, it's a wonderful metaphor. I guess what I should say, there are several parts of the answer. The Matisse's interest in the circus may surprise us. But the circus was in the late 19th, early 20th century, it was one of the most popular forms of entertainment. So he was quite accustomed, there were permanent indoor circuses in Paris, for example. So it's an interest that he had. I mean, it's an interest that he shared as an artist with Picasso, you know, with many people. But I think Matisse was really interested in technique, you know, not just, you know, representing the circus, say the way that Seurat does, but he was interested in the movement. So once he started illustrating books, doing these, you know, high-end art books in the 1930s, he really was learning how to combine. And I hope in my paper, I was trying to suggest that in their very different ways, Woolf, Hughes, and Matisse learn how to combine elements that ordinarily would not be there. You know, Woolf learns to use photographs, for example, something that she first does in her novel Orlando, you know, playfully. She does something very different with it in Three Guineas. So yes, this juggling, and I just really, really liked the metaphor because I think it's both about the activity, and in the long version of this, in the article length version, I spend a lot of time on how these books change the way that we read. And what fascinated me was that in different times, Woolf and Hughes and Matisse are all writing about how reading should work. And I think that that's in some ways what they have most in common. And for Matisse, to wrap up this extended answer, the first books that he did were merely illustrated. You know, here are poems by Mallarmé. He did the illustration. As soon as Joyce's Ulysses was no longer officially obscene, he did an illustrated version of Ulysses, which he wasn't thrilled about, but he was happy to do it. But what makes his jazz book so different was that it wasn't just, you know, it was more than just, here are the plates and I'll just tack this other stuff in. It was his most dramatic experiment in how a book works. And I think juggling is exactly what he asks the reader to do. And as I say, no two page spreads are the same. And especially that decision to use his own handwriting, which makes it so personal and so extraordinary. So I think literally, I mean, juggling is all about the hands, and I think that he puts his hands right into the book.
That's wonderful. And a lot of that's coming across in your presentation, but I just wanted to hear you speak a little bit more about it. That's really fascinating. And thank you. We have another question. James has his hand raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Really interesting presentations. I just have kind of a blanket comment, and I'm sorry that it's a bit shamelessly promotional, but if you're interested in the engagement between literature and music, please, please, please come to our virtual keynote speaker at 1:30 p.m. He's a poet from Mexico, a contemporary poet, and I'm a literary translator, and it'll be a bilingual presentation. So if you don't speak Spanish, that's okay. But he has an entire book of poetry based on the music of Thelonious Monk, and we will be reading excerpts from that work. That work is called Un Jardín Arrasado de Cenizas, or in English, A Garden Razed to Ashes. So please come attend that presentation if this is an interesting topic for you. Thank you.
Not shameless at all. That was a wonderful plug for something that I think we'd all be interested in. So one more question for Marjan. I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned you were a PhD candidate, and I was curious if this presentation today was connected to your larger dissertation project.
It was related to my field exam, one of the novels that I had to read, and apart from White Teeth and NW. And then I saw the significant difference between White Teeth. For example, I think that in White Teeth, Smith was successful in empowering women. But here, she tries her best to give some strategies to equip her character with some strategies to be empowered. But unfortunately, the female characters are still trapped in their own, problems, and they couldn't find a salvation. So it is one of the novels. It was one of the novels which was on the list. So and I applied Freud, Lacan, Marx, and Judith Butler in these novels, and I brought some quotations from this novel. But for the PhD dissertation, I'm still working because I'm supposed to choose 10 novels. I'm not sure it will be included in my list of dissertation, or maybe White Teeth. So I'm doubtful. So I'm still working on it. And the supervisor is waiting for me. Thank you very much. Thank you for asking the question.
I just wanted to give you another chance to talk about your research. Thank you for presenting.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone for attending this session. Last chance for any final questions.